Hello and welcome to Roadmap 2015. I'm Benga Ashiru. Today we'll be taking a look at the federal government's renewed war against insurgency. While the federal government is getting accolades from the National Assembly in its headlong approach and the recapture of the rebel strongholds in the Northeast, some are a bit wary of what they call the election bait. Can the momentum of the Nigerian military be sustained? Or is this just a way of winning sympathy votes for the elections? Why is this onslaught coming now? What is the terms of reference of the international military intervention in the Nigerian insurgency? Will this not be exposing Nigeria's security apparatus to the outside world? Will there be reprisals from the insurgents? What is the fate of the civilian population in this recent onslaught? These are indeed questions begging for answers in a desperate polity that cries out for intervention. Let's bring you these reports on the president's recent visit to the captured towns in the Northeast.
Dr. Good Luck Ebele Jonathan!
The combat-ready president and commander-in-chief may have had three things in mind while visiting the war fronts in Mubi, Adamawa State and Baga in Borno State. Firstly, to commend the gallant soldiers for the able way they recaptured territories formerly in the hands of the insurgents, a proof that they can protect the territorial integrity of Nigeria and shame those who had concluded that it was impossible.
Before this time, we didn't have enough material to confront the terrorists. But now, at least, we'll receive significant number of weapons that has been improving the operations. We are pleased with you, what you are doing. We'll continue to encourage you. The whole world appreciates the strength of the Nigerian army.
How to continue to reinforce them with necessary equipment and logistics to complete the mission, as well as their welfare, including rewards for the soldiers when it is all said and done, especially with families of soldiers who lost their lives in this battle, is next on his mind.
But be rest assured that anything that is due you, you'll surely get it. And all of you who have showed gallantry will be rewarded according to the traditions of the armed forces and according to the rules and regulations governing the operations and, of course, the goodwill of Nigerians and their country.
The soldiers' response was reassuring as they chant gallantly.
Never again! Never again! Never again!
With the political parties now adjusting to the election postponement, analysts are asking if the postponement isn't a game-changer tactics for the PDP. With the recent attacks on campaign trails, is the peace accord signed by the presidential candidate still valid? Channels TV had a chat with the Minister of State for the Federal Capital Territory, Jumoke Akinjide. She says a situation where over 30% of the PVCs is yet to be distributed and where haddock staff are yet to be properly trained in the use of card reader, this is unacceptable in an election situation. The FCT Minister of State also discards insinuations that the recent military onslaught is politically motivated. Take a listen.
I find that a very strange view, to be honest. And for anybody that is a Democrat, they should be taking the view of the PDP, and especially the view of His Excellency Mr. President, which is one man, one vote, one woman, one vote, one youth, one vote. Now, if that is the case, where every eligible and willing registered voter is allowed to vote, how on earth can you justify carrying on an election where 33% of registered voters have not been given the opportunity of collecting their permanent voter's card? As you know, as of the date when the election was postponed, over 24 million PVCs had yet to be collected. Secondly, a lot of the card readers had not even arrived on the shores of this country. Thirdly, the registered the documents they would use had not been printed. And fourthly, the ad hoc staff, the NYSC students, had not been engaged or even trained. So we had a situation where Nigerians, millions, were going to be disenfranchised, and it was even more alarming if you consider that not only were many people not given their voters' cards, but even those who had collected their voters' cards were disproportionately in the northern part of the country. And no one could understand how Lagos, at that point, had recorded only, I think, 38 or 39% of distribution. Ogun too was in the 30s. My own state, Oyo, had only 49% had collected their voters' card. Whereas in Northwest and Northeast, where they had, in Northeast specifically, where we had insurgency, they were recording 80s and 90% distribution. So not only was the distribution not complete, but it was completely skewed. So in the interest of fair play, in the interest of constitutionality.
It's on record that INEC has surpassed the PVC distribution of 2011, which was just barely within the range of 68%. And right now, people are saying that the justification is unfounded for the postponement of these elections.
It doesn't make sense for INEC to say we will distribute only 60-something%, because I've had that argument. They say, oh, we distributed up 65% or 60 whatever percent because in the past, not more than 60-something% of voters turned up at the polls. Well, that just doesn't make sense. You're supposed to distribute as near to 100% as possible, and then let people decide their interest, whether they're going to vote or not. You cannot, INEC does not have the right to disenfranchise voters by not giving them the PVCs and saying, oh, well, we think it's okay now if we only have 60-something%. That is not right. So I insist, and my party insists, and every well-meaning Nigeria insists that INEC should do its job. In India, do you know that PVCs are taking door to door? In Nigeria, we are told to come and pick it up, not even at the polling units, but at ward level. Even sometimes it's a central location.
Are you insisting on 100% distribution of PVCs?
No, I am insisting that 60-something% is not sufficient. A skewed distribution where Lagos has 30-something% distribution is grossly insufficient. Where Oyo has 49% is grossly insufficient. Where Ogun has 30-something% is grossly insufficient. How can INEC justify? You answer that. Ask them. How can they justify distribution in the 80s and the 90s in the Northeast where there's insurgency? But in the Southwest where there's peace, they say they cannot achieve more than 30-something% and they're ready to go to the polls.
Are you suggesting INEC is involved in a kind of foul play?
The facts speak for themselves. If it is not foul play, then it is maladministration.
Now, many have likened this postponement to a typical examination situation where a student that was almost bound to fail an exam is given a lifeline to go back and prepare. And this is also likened to the federal government intensifying its massive onslaught against insurgents in the Northeast. And many are wondering if this is indeed a game changer for the PDP.
I think for any well-meaning Nigerian, defeat of Boko Haram is the #1 priority. And what has happened is that the federal government has been working assiduously, quietly, as needs to be done when things are so delicate, security matters, on getting the neighboring states, the neighboring countries, to collaborate with Nigeria so that there will be concerted action to crush the Boko Haram simultaneously. Finally, the governments of Chad, Cameroon, and Niger agreed to work with Nigeria and to launch attacks at the same time. And that is part of the reason why we're seeing the success we have. Again, the federal government had been working to re-equip the military, and we're again seeing the benefit of that. So a lot of things came together. and who needs to be convinced that the government is doing the best will suddenly now realize that this is something the government has been working on. It could not have been that because of a postponement, that is why Niger and Chad and Cameroon decided to launch an attack simultaneously in concert with Nigeria.
Let's set the record straight.
So it cannot be that it has anything to do with the postponement.
Now let's review the peace accord with particular reference to the violence in Okrika. Would you still say the peace accord is still valid?
I'm surprised that you only pick Okrika. If you want to talk about electoral violence, then you should look at the whole spectrum of Nigeria. Talk about northern Nigeria. As a fact, the most electoral violence that we have endured in Nigeria has happened in northern Nigeria. You know what happened in 2011 when those young NYSC students were killed. As of today, if you're wearing a PDP emblem or a Jonathan shirt, you are likely in some parts of the north to be assaulted or even killed. Vehicles have been burnt in Jos. The president's convoy was attacked in parts of the state.
Are you suggesting that's a retaliatory
What I am
tactics?
saying, I have never talked about retaliation. I am saying that your question is biased by focusing on Okrika. If you want to talk in good faith about violence, then I condemn, and my party condemns electoral violence or political violence everywhere in the country. Okrika is condemned, but it is just one incident amongst hundreds. And for the APC propaganda machine to be supported in this way is intolerable. APC is more than guilty and has no moral right to talk about political violence. In this election, they have been on the offensive, but they have this habit of crying foul where they are guilty. And the Nigerian media should try to be responsible, to be objective, and to be professional, and not to mislead Nigerians by falling into the APP propaganda mill. Let me repeat my stand and the stand of President Goodluck Ebele Jonathan and the stand of my party. We condemn electoral violence in every form for every party, and the security services should be up and doing and ensure that people have a right to associate, have a right of freedom of speech without being in any way intimidated.
Now let's have your thoughts on the deployment of military in the observation of elections. Do you think military should be involved in monitoring elections?
It is not for me to support. It is for INEC to ask for assistance. And I will only say what the head of INEC has said, Professor Jega, when he was asked this question, if you remember. And he has said it and he has written it, and you can research it in your investigative journalism and find out. And what he said was that because this issue came up when the elections in Osun and Ekiti were being held, and there was talk of militarization. And he said the police are the ones who are responsible primarily, and they are the ones who will be in polling units. The military are supposed to provide a cordon. They don't approach or man polling units, but they do take strategic positions on certain roads to make sure that people don't snatch ballot boxes and run away with them, to make sure that voters, people who are not allowed to move around, don't move around like thugs, to protect the communities. They don't approach polling units, they don't interfere with the polling process, but they do provide a security cover and cordon so that the electoral process can go along smoothly and Nigerians can have the freedom to vote.
Let's keep the conversation going by sending us your comments on our different social media platforms showing on the screen. We'll be taking a break now, and when we return, APC's National Vice Chairman says the forthcoming election is not just about who wins, it's about Nigerians' call for change. Join us again.